Hey, what's up guys? Hardleg Joe here with the profile for my spicy Generaider deck. And before you say anything about the list, I know, this is not an optimal build. The best version of Generaider's probably the one that uses the Gearsu engine to turbo out true king of all calamities. It's very powerful, very consistent, but I specifically chose not to play this version for two reasons. One, I try to design decks that can dodge the ban list, and Calamities is quickly becoming too consistent to remain legal. And two, I made this deck specifically so I could play it on my channel, and Calamities Turbo is really boring to watch. It's essentially a one-sided Mystic Mine on legs, which doesn't make for very exciting or entertaining duels. So instead I went for maximum excitement, building a deck full of spicy tech cards meant to show off all the cool plays that this archetype is capable of. As such, you should think of this list less like a finished deck and more like a starting point. Here's a neat deck with a ton of possibilities, take it and whittle it down into something more reasonable. With that said, let's go over everything that's in here. Usually I do a wrap for this part, but we've got a lot of cards to go over, so no fat rhymes this time. Starting off with our monster lineup, we have two Hardy Boys, one Super Special Chocolate Parshath, one Frodo, one Martle, one Giant Fuck-Off Castle, one indie game about fencing, three of the unofficial Generaider Hand Trap, one Doug, three Hellaball and Doom bosses, one Sickle, one Hammer, three Lone Fire, Lopped Fire, I guess, three Lopped Fire in Disguise, and three Surprise Synchro Shenanigan Squadron. For spells, we're on one Pot of Recycling, one card to search the field spell, three more cards to search the field spell, three free Calamities, two Cups of a Carpenter, and three of the honkinest, stronkinest field spells in the game. For traps, we've got three Bringers of Communism, even more cards to search the field spell, a final card to search the field spell, a card to protect the field spell, and two Grumpy Old Men. Our extra deck contains one each of Sun Muncher, Big Whale, a Wyvern that's actually a dragon that's actually a dragon, Mr. Mosquito, Earth Fucker, Mystic Mine on legs, an aircraft carrier, Jormungandr, the Generaider boss of Sneck, Boral, another Boral, probably another Boral, some filler, corn, and some kind of disco cat girl. The side deck I'll go over a bit later, though it's mostly just alternative options I wanted to talk about, like that Gearsu combo I mentioned earlier. Except for the artifacts. You should probably side deck those if you're main decking Sanctum, since Scythe and Lancia can completely shut down certain decks. Oh, and also the counter traps too, if you want to do like the counter fairy generator, but then I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I go over all the little techs and engines you can put in this, I should explain how the generators themselves work. Basically, everything revolves around the field spell, which says, if your opponent adds a card from their main deck to their hand, summon a generator from your deck in defense position. We play a whole toolbox of generators with different effects, and since most of them are level 9, summoning them out of the deck is pretty much the only way you'll be summoning them. Which is why we can play most of them at 1, even in a 48 card deck, because you do not want to draw these. What you want is your field spell, which will give you access to your entire archetype as soon as your opponent draws at the start of their turn. Now, in addition to getting you a monster, the field spell also says if you summon a generator during your opponent's turn, you can summon as many generator tokens as possible to your side of the field, but destroy them during the end phase. These tokens are key because most of the generators have quick effects that you can only activate by tributing generators. It's actually some pretty cool theming. The level 9s are all raid bosses in some big MMO, and the tokens represent minions that they have to sacrifice for more power. Essentially, your tokens are ammo for your effects, a resource that replenishes at the start of your opponent's turn and then dissolves in the end phase. As for what you can do with these effects, Best Boy contribute 2 raiders to negate any card or effect, which is why he's the best boy and gets played at 2. Utgard contribute 2 monsters to target and banish 1 card on the field, which makes it the best removal. Frody, meanwhile, contribute any number of generators and then destroy that many monsters, though your opponent gets to draw 1 for each of their monsters destroyed, which is why a lot of people don't even bother with this guy anymore. Personally, I find it's good to have him at 1 for those instances where you really need to pop a card and you don't have 2 monsters to tribute. Castle can be dead from time to time. Mr. High Elf over here can always tribute himself. Moving on, Nidoqueen contribute 1 Raider to negate the special summon of a monster, which is nice but easily played around in many decks. Dovelgus contribute generators on the field to summon other generators out of the hand, which is pretty useless most of the time, but you kinda have to play them at 1 just in case you open with key monsters in your hand. Finally, Hella contribute raiders on the field to summon raiders in the grave, which helps you to recycle all your one-ofs when they inevitably tribute themselves to negate all the things. In this 48 card version of the deck, I play her at 3 since I like multiple chances at recovery, but you can easily bump her down to 2 or even 1 if you want a smaller deck. The only level 9 generator who doesn't have a quick effect is Plant Lady, who just searches a generator card when she's summoned. This effect can be a lifesaver when paired with our final generator, Loptar, who in addition to being a level 4 monster, is essentially a spell speed 2 Lone Fire Blossom for the archetype, able to tribute any raider to summon a different raider from the deck. If you don't open with your field spell, but you have your attack Helolopter, you can normal summon him, tribute himself to summon Big Green, who then searches the field spell, or one of the many generator cards that searches the field spell, such as Boss Quest. This lets you shuffle 1 generator from your hand into the deck in order to search 2 generator spell traps. It can be dead from time to time, but its usefulness is worth the risk since it gets key monsters out of your hand while searching the field spell along with some insurance. Such as Boss Fight, a trap that lets you activate the field spell from your deck or graveyard, and then makes your opponent draw a card which will trigger said field spell. Alternatively, you could also get Boss Room, which offers some of the strangest protection in the game. It says, once per turn, if your opponent activates a card or effect in response to a generator card or effect, you can discard a card, and your opponent's effect becomes, each player draws 1 card. While it's never great to plush your opponent, it's worth it in this case because it protects the field spell you desperately need to survive. Whether it's Ash, Ogre, Twin Twisters, or Cosmic Cyclone, there's a lot of things that can stop this in the draw phase, and this trap turns them all into draw 1 card, which is preferable to losing your main playmaker. And really that's the entire core of the deck. Find the field spell by any means necessary, use it to summon out your toolbox who can then disrupt the opponent during their turn. If your opponent can't remove the monster and the field spell, you're just gonna keep summoning more disruption every turn, until your opponent can no longer resist. Pretty much everything else in here is just a tech card, except for like Terraforming and Metaverse, which are just more field spell searchers. Oh, and Pot of Avarice, which lets you recycle your generators and your artifacts since you play them at 1. Oh, and World Legacy Monstrosity. You'll want to play this at 3 regardless of which version of the deck you play. It lets you summon a level 9 out of your hand, which can be useful in its own right. Or, if you already control a level 9, you can summon 2 other level 9s out of the deck with different types and attributes. If you open with this and Reptar, you've pretty much got an instant true king of all calamities, which is what the meta version of this deck tries to do. There's a roundabout way to search this using Gearsu and some World Chalice stuff. MBT Yu-Gi-Oh! Actually made a video about it. Check that out if you're interested. I mostly use this to make the other rank 9s, unless I'm really on the ropes. Speaking of the extra deck, these are pretty much the rank 9s you want to play. You could put in like 9 Lives Cat or Dyson Sphere if you really want to, but at least include these 4. The links, however, just a toolbox of whatever. I rarely make them, so honestly feel free to play whatever. The synchros, however, are specifically chosen because of our first spicy tech, Hoppier Squadron. Shout out to GCD for suggesting this thing. It's a level 2 tuner, and during your opponent's main phase, it can leap out of your hand and synchro summon with 1 monster you control. The tokens from boss stage are level 4, meaning you can make level 6 synchros with them. I suggest Red Wyvern for its removal and Coral Dragon if you just want to block an attack and draw a card, but most of the time I go for Desert Locust, who makes your opponent discard a card when it's summoned. It's their choice of what they discard, so this is not always useful, but if they only have 1 card in hand, or if they've just searched a key playmaker, this can be devastating. More importantly, this thing is also a tuner that can synchro during your opponent's turn, so if you have another token left over, you can make White Aura Bahamut. This is a 3300 beater that summons another 3300 beater as a quick effect, in the form of a token. It's not exactly game-winning on its own, but it can put on a lot of damage really quickly, especially late game. You can also use Sir Hoppington with your level 9 monsters to make Star Eater. Again, it's mostly just a beat stick, but summoning it can be a great way to dodge out of targeted removal, or just get rid of a boss that has already had its effects negated or its attack lowered. Moving on, our next spicy tech is Triose Hierarchy, which is honestly not that spicy because it feels tailor-made for generators, but I don't see a lot of decks playing it for some reason. It's another level 9 monster, and if it's in your hand or graveyard, you can, as a quick effect, tribute up to 3 fairy monsters and special summon this card. If you just tributed 1 fairy, congratulations, you have a 2900 booty. If you tributed 2 fairies, you can destroy 1 card your opponent controls. And if you tributed 3 fairies, you get to draw 2 cards in addition to a non-targeting pop. Why is this good in generators? Because the tokens made by the field spell are fairies, meaning even if your opponent kaijus your 1 negation or baits it out, you can still summon this thing for a surprise +3 in draws and disruption. I played at 3 because I like surprising people, but even if you're going for a non-spicy version of this deck, I think it's worth maining at 1 because you can summon it off of Monstrosity, use it as Ixie material, and then dump it in the graveyard to lie in wait like some kind of angelic booby trap. Speaking of that thing I just said, that's exactly what I do with this Parshath feller. It's also a level 9, and if it's in the graveyard or hand, and you negate a spell trap or monster effect, like, you know, with this guy over here, you can banish 2 fairies from anywhere and summon this thing. It's got 2800 attack, does piercing damage, and if you deal damage with it, you can search a counter trap, which is why we play these 2. Of course you can banish your tokens for this thing's summon, but it's better to banish fairies that are uselessly sitting in the graveyard, which we fortunately have quite a few of. Triose is a fairy, Roppelflopter is a fairy, the artifacts are fairies, which is probably an engine I don't need to explain, it's more disruption and it synergizes with these 2. And finally we have Condemned Witch, who is not only just a fairy, but when she's normal summoned, you can search a forbidden quick play spell. That's why we have the 2 searchable chalice, it's just free monster negation. More importantly though, during the opponent's turn, you can tribute this and summon any level 4 fairy out of the deck, which gets you Lopter, which gets you any generator you want, while also filling up the graveyard with fairies. This thing also gets you Bountiful Artemis and other counter fairy staples. You know, if you were thinking about removing the synchro stuff and just running counter raiders. If you do that, you might want to also consider the trade-in for level 9s. I don't run it in this version since I really don't want generators in the grave. But all your level 9 fairy stuff likes being in the grave, so running this along with more Parshaths is just free advantage that can draw you into more counter traps. All that really leaves then is the one spicy tech I didn't include in the main deck, which is World Legacy Awakens, a trap that lets you link summon during your opponent's turn. Like your Easter Bunny, this thing can help you turn your tokens into extra deck monsters, though it's a bit limited since most of the good cards these days require effect monsters or non-token monsters. The best use of this is probably to make IP Masquerena, who can then go into bigger cards by using generators that have already used their effects. There's also this Boojin link, which is actually pretty neat. It can be made with 2 tokens, and when it's summoned, you can summon a monster out of your hand and graveyard that have the same level, and then immediately Ixie summon with them. So you know, if you have a level 9 in the hand and grave, you can make calamities during your opponent's turn. It's not consistent, a bit too spicy even for me, but if you want to go really crazy with this, it might be something worth experimenting with. Regardless, there's the deck. If you want to see this thing in action, check out the main What a Deck video linked down in the description. There I'll be playing 10 duels against random opponents, showing off how this thing works. Otherwise, like the video if you liked it, comment if there's any changes you would make, and subscribe if you want more strange deck profiles in general. I do one of these every other week. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, good luck and have fun.